so.
Class just started now. Class starts at 3:10, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, see, we're good. All that was pre-class material. All right, so everybody in here knows who I am. Good. So this is 440. Again, this is my cell phone number. Best way to reach me is text followed by email. You can call. I'll just ignore it. I may not even listen to the voicemail.
You may not even check your text.
You check the text.
Most of the time, and then you're done texting, and then you won't look at it.
Right. I only reply if it's like worthy of a reply.
Right.
So that's on you. You gotta make sure it's. Yeah.
So always involve swears or food in the text.
Let's see. This is when the class meets. This is networking, blah, blah. Homework assignments, 40% of your grade. Quizzes, 20% of your grade. I think I'm going to give even more quizzes this semester. Even more than last semester. So, purpose of quizzes.
More on which class?
All of them.
Because you gave like 2 in one class and 90 in another class. And you thought somehow that even though
Which class only had 2?
I don't remember. There's one of them. And yeah, there's one of them that had like 90.
I don't think there was any class only had 2.
What?
There was a class that maybe only had like 7 or 8. Yeah, so, I don't know. But the purpose of the quizzes is so that when we talk about something in class, you should be thinking about that between this class and next class, or at least trying not to forget about what we talked about. Most of the time I'll ask you something on the quiz that deals with what we discussed last class or something very related. So if you're paying attention and you're participating in class and you're not sitting there messing around on Facebook or playing video games or streaming YouTube and all the other things that I can see in that camera right there when I go back and review it. And also, you know how sometimes I have people sit in the back in class? Yeah, they give me reports as well. So, yeah, so for those of you who bomb the quizzes because of that, don't do that anymore so that you'll come in and do well on the quizzes. Quizzes should actually help your grade. There's no reason really not to have a 90 or 95% in quizzes at least. Midterm final, 20% each. The normal rule applies. You bomb the midterm, come in and do well in the final. I'll replace your midterm with what you got in the final, but not the other way around. So you can't ace the midterm and then blow off the final. So, you know, you get a get out of jail free card if you bomb the midterm, but still think you can do something in the class. Normal 90, 80, 70 scale. Attendance is required, blah, blah, blah. I probably won't actually take attendance unless I start noticing that you're missing all the time. They'll just go in and mark you absent a bunch of times. That way they make sure they notify you that you're going to get kicked out of the class. I think you only get like 6 free absences. After 6, they kick you out.
It's 6 in a row or 10.
That's it. 6 in a row or 10 total, right? And then I don't know if you automatically get kicked out or I'm supposed to kick you out. I'll probably not kick you out, just fail you. It's preference, really, I guess. So that's on you. You guys are adults. I record all the lectures. I'll put them up on Angel. So if you do miss a class, make sure you read it. Go and watch the lecture online. Quizzes or read it. Yeah. Quizzes are usually right at the beginning of class, so you might want to make sure you're here on time because I always find it entertaining when you show up like 10 minutes late and I say, haha, you missed a quiz, and then point at the papers. Yeah, so that 90, 80, 70 scale, top and bottom 2% of it are the pluses and minuses. I reserve the right to curve, but don't count on it. Blah, blah, blah. Questions, comments, concerns, bribes.
A little early for bribes, isn't it?
No, it's never too early for bribes. Early in the semester is when students are most full of money. As parents send them back, filled up the tanks. You know, as the semester goes out, that gets wasted on pizzas and stuff like that, rather than buying a passing grade.
So can I just bribe you with pizzas and save my money?
That's kind of the same thing.
Well, I'm saving money, but I'm still bribing you.
Right. Well, I guess a bribe's a bribe. That's kind of indirect, though. That might actually be almost ethical. All right. So questions about the syllabus? All right. So we also have a textbook in here. It's $450. Yeah.
That money thing, you don't have it.
You accept 90%?
I get a 90% kickback. You can only order it through me. I've purchased them off of eBay. Apparently, there was some thing going on recently. It might still be going on. There's some book that the bookstore is buying back right now because they need it for some class this semester. It might be some math book. And the bookstore, I think, is paying $70 per book for it, but you can buy it off eBay for like $30. So you can.
I bought a math book off of Amazon for $10, and the bookstore wanted it back for way more than $10.
Yeah, I mean, it's that kind of thing. But apparently, they're looking for like 39 copies right now. So I found out from Nick Shoemaker, so we'll talk to him if you want details. Because he started ordering them off eBay, apparently. All right, so we're actually using 3 different resources in the class. This is an open source textbook, so this isn't illegal. You guys can download it off the website, perfectly reasonable. You can read the rules down here, blah, blah, blah. So if anybody questions you about it, you don't have to lie. You're allowed to use it. I typically don't like using normal textbooks for classes because I think they're overpriced. It's more of a thing. I'm not necessarily opposed to it, but everybody's got to make money. But I guess $250 for a book seems ridiculous. I mean, some of those books are ridiculous, aren't they? Oh my gosh. Okay, so anyway, I'll probably give you some reading assignments and stuff like that out of this book. The sections of this book line up with the sections of the slide set I'm going to be using, which might line up with what's the knowledge in my head. The knowledge in my head will trump all of it, because what I know is right. And whether the book says or the slide says something different, that can't be right. So, in any case, I'll give you some assignments, but this book is up there, but the book does not match the slide sets we're going to be using. Those are from something else, from one of those $250 books that I didn't make you buy. Okay. Oh, it's going to open up PowerPoint. I hate PowerPoint. Actually, that opened way quicker than I expected it to.
Yeah, it did actually.
But I'm still shutting this down. I don't know how to draw my pretty pictures in PowerPoint. Keynote. Just because I'm having to convert this PowerPoint slide. Once I save it to Keynote, it'll be more bestest.
Most bestest or more better?
Combination of this is better.
Wait. Perfect. Yeah, so this is one of those. Oh, reopen. I don't need you to open it from there now. I just need you to open it from the cloud. All right. Here's that computer networking book. I have to cover this slide in order to make it legal for me to use this slide set. I suggest you purchase this textbook. See, if you use these slides in class, you must mention their source. After all, we'd like people to buy our book, so you should buy their book. It is a good book, a top-down approach. We're going to be talking about the different layers of the computer networks, TCP/IP stack. So this book covers them, so the slide set goes that route, but also the textbook that we're using that's open source also covers the same one, so it's fine. They'll be compatible. But I'll use this to keep us somewhat on topic before I go off to Poseidon. All right, so, who?
Because we know you will.
Yeah, right.
Do we have a test on Greek mythology or sometime at some point in the middle of the semester.
It's been covered in class, so potentially.
Yeah,
No, that was before class.
I just mentioned Poseidon just like 30 seconds ago. And she's been to Mount Olympus, so she has an unfair advantage, but she didn't bring me back a shield, so she's already 2 quizzes down.
You just wanted a case.
Hmm?
I said, did they sell shields there, or did you?
Well, I figured she was talking to those
I didn't see it.
Zeus dudes and stuff.
Zeus dudes.
Doesn't he have shields and crap?
I don't think they have Zeus dudes there.
You know,
Could
see why he couldn't
she
make a
just went to the
shield,
wrong
but-
gift shop.
Yeah, you just shield. And then, oh, I'm a big fan of the Kraken. And then Dr. Locklear reminded me on Facebook that it's in Chuck Norris's aquarium. All right, stupid slide. Well, here, overview stuff. So what's the internet? We're going to talk about that for a good portion of today. What are protocols? Edge networks, the different pieces that are on the outside of a network. The internals of a network, the actual core. How we measure networks in terms of performance, security crap. Not too deep into security. We have our own security course here that talks about specifics of security, but we'll talk about the high level. And then the protocol layers. The layers are kind of the big deal in this class. We're going to be dealing with a bunch of different, if I just show you real quick here. Look at the table of contents of this guy. Application layer, transport layer, network layer, data link layer. You know, it's TCP/IP networks are broken down into these various layers where each layer has kind of a job. And when one layer is done doing its job, it passes it to the next layer. And that's almost an object-oriented approach to implementing the TCP/IP stack, and we'll talk about what that means. But the idea is each of those layers is written as their own object. So one layer takes a certain kind of input, it has a certain kind of output, and how it accomplishes that is up to it. But the next layer is expecting the output in a certain format. That type of thing. Okay. So when you hear just the phrase computer networking, what do you think? What does that mean to you? It means something to some of you because you can't program, so you must be able to do something. But
Computers talking to each other.
computers talking to each other. Okay, fair enough. So what do you know about networking? What are the different... How do you make computers talk to each other? What are some different means by which that happens, that you know that happens?
Like, what do you mean? Like, through the Ethernet cord or through Wi-Fi?
Yeah, okay, so Ethernet. So you've heard this. What is Ethernet? What do you know about that?
Or that you plug in one end,
Okay.
plug the other end into the other computer.
Okay, that probably wouldn't work unless it's a crossover cable, but we'll go with it. Okay, so fat telephone cable, right?
Yep.
That's an Ethernet cord, okay, and you hook stuff together with it. So that's one way you can connect computers, is through a wire, a physical wire. You also mentioned Wi-Fi. How does that work? Magic. It's magical, magical radio-y stuff, right? And as Wi-Fi gets more and more, as Wi-Fi evolves, they keep using higher frequencies. Those of you who are in 325, what's our frequency? How often it happens, right? So you have the period of it, but the idea is that when you go to higher frequencies, it's updating more often. So since it's updating more often, whoever is sampling that data can read it more often, which allows us then to have faster transfer speeds. So that's why when they keep upping, we had a 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi, then you have 5.4 or 5.8 gigahertz Wi-Fi, depending on your router. So that's kind of the scoop there, but it's magical airwave stuff. Okay, anything else besides Wi-Fi and Ethernet cords that we've heard of? Okay, potentially. Yeah, I mean, I don't think USB is real common for what we would at the high level consider computer networking. But how do you think, if we go back to the question about what is networking, how can USB be used for networking?
Data transfer,
Okay, between what?
devices, different devices, different
Okay, so maybe the common case being one of the USB sticks, you plug it in and the USB connection is being used to transfer stuff from one computer, the USB stick, to the hard drive on the computer it's plugged into, or an external hard drive, something like that. In the early days of USB, USB was actually designed to daisy chain 128 total devices together, where one of the devices was the host computer. So 127 unique devices. So that's kind of creating a network of devices. That never actually kind of took off. Really the most we ever see with that is one of those keyboards that has 2 or 3 USB ports on it. So you plug the keyboard into USB, then you plug your jump drive or something into the keyboard, and we're all happy because it's convenient because they gave us 2 or 3 extra USB ports. But you potentially could have 127 or 126 USB ports. Be awesome. All right. What else? Go ahead.
Fiber optic cable.
Fiber optic. What's that? What's the difference between that and Ethernet?
Faster, bigger.
Faster, bigger. Okay. Getting back to this Ethernet thing. Is Ethernet the name of the cable? Is it an Ethernet cable? Because you're talking about fiber optic. Is that the name of the cable? Is it a fiber optic cable? Yeah, it is a fiber optic cable. What is the other thing, an Ethernet cable?
It's like Cat 5.
Yeah, Cat 5 cable.
They have Cat 6.
They have Cat 6 that uses all the wires, all 8 wires. But in any case, so then what's Ethernet? If it's not the name of the cable, what is Ethernet? Does it fall underneath the category of more magic?
Isn't that
Who
more
came up with that name decided this is awesome.
It sounds legit.
Isn't it more of just a way to describe a wired connection?
Way of describing a wired
So
connection.
it's just kind of become synonymous with Cat 5 because that's probably the most common.
Well, I think, generally speaking, the answer to that is no. That's not what it is, but I think it has become that.
Yeah.
So I think you're accurate in that people have referred to it as an Ethernet cable, or Ethernet just means a wired connection. But that doesn't, historically, that's not what Ethernet meant. Ethernet's actually a network protocol. So it's a way that computers are networked together utilizing some sort of physical, well, initially some sort of physical connection. But now, Wi-Fi works. We do Ethernet over Wi-Fi. If your computer's on Wi-Fi right now, it's getting a IP address somehow, whatever the heck that is. We'll learn about all that stuff in here as well. And the protocol it's using is the Ethernet protocol. Okay, so we'll talk about protocols. Protocols are languages that computers use to speak with each other. All right, anything else you could think of for how computers are connected? About microwaves? That's kind of been the as the internet evolved, that was kind of the newer thing, because we had to beam stuff up into space and then back down to get over to the other side of the world and that kind of crap. So chances are, if you are connecting to some website in where is this week? Is it Denmark maybe, where the torrent place is? Pirate Bay?
They moved it to Russia.
Russia now? Okay, so you're going over to Russia, to your favorite, website to get legal stuff. So it's in Russia now. Well, that's going to probably beam into space, then back down, and that's using microwaves to do that, bouncing off satellites and that kind of crap. And then you have that another dude that wants to put internet access at Mars. You hear about that? I posted that on Facebook. Was it Elon Musk?
Yeah.
His name? Yeah, something like that. Yeah, he wants to have internet access in Mars, or at Mars. Yeah, I kind of thought the same thing.
He wants to build a city there in 10 years.
Yeah, I get it, but don't we sort of kind of need to, like, before you put internet someplace, you've got to be there, right? Yeah, it was kind
Set
of.
it up beforehand.
Yeah, it was
So
a.
we can, that way we can already have it when we get there.
I guess that's
We
true.
have those first
I do
two
get upset when I
minutes.
go on vacation someplace and I don't have any network activity. So if I were traveling to Mars, I would be pleased if I got there and they already had Wi-Fi.
You We want to make sure we can get those first Snapchats and Instagrams out as soon as we land.
It's true. Okay. So, tell me about what the internet is. So you told me about networks in general, what you do. What is the internet?
One who is placing magic and glory.
It's a place to download illegal music and movies. And now streaming and figuring out how to circumvent the purchasing process. Right? that's the new thing. Well, what is the internet? Go ahead.
It's just like a large LAN,
Okay. Well, what's a WAN?
like wide area.
Okay, wide area network. What does that mean? Just a bunch of computers networked together?
Just like all over the world.
Okay, so the internet is like the ultimate network. It's a network of all the computers in the world, or a large number of the computers in the world, right? Okay, what do we use the internet for? Bunch of stuff, right? In the early days, when you said the internet, you were probably just talking about web browsing, right? Maybe email. That's internet stuff. Any of you ever used Gopher? Gopher was one of the original utilities on the internet. It was Gopher was kind of our search engine before Google existed, but you didn't do it through a web page. It was called Gopher. That kind of died out. So the internet is a thing, in that it's a giant network, but it also has problem-solving purpose.
Brought to us by Al Gore.
Brought to you by Al Gore, correct. All right. So, internet. Millions of connected computing devices. Not just what we consider to be computers. Well, what's a computer? If I wanted you to give a concise definition of a computer, what might you say today?
A piece of hardware that has software running on it.
A piece of hardware that has software running on it. I don't think that's horrible. Might ask the question, does it have to have software running on it? Or could its entire purpose be built in hardware? Potentially, but I don't think that's a horrible answer. Anything else? "20 years ago, we would have pointed to like a desktop tower thing and said, that's a computer, right? Before that, we would have pointed to the gymnasium thing and said, that's a computer, the giant UNIVAC and EDVACs and those guys. But now our definition of a computer is a lot broader. Is this a computer? Absolutely. I mean, this is significantly more powerful than our supercomputers were 20 years ago. I mean, it's not even close. This is a lot faster. Go ahead.
I read the other day, Apollo 11, to go to the moon ran on a 1.024 megahertz processor.
Mm-hmm. But even that doesn't necessarily mean anything because we're dealing with different architectures. So if we had a 1 megahertz processor on a modern architecture, it would be probably thousands of times faster than a 1 megahertz processor back then. So it's even slower than you think, is the punchline. So computing has gotten a lot faster, and our definition of computer keeps increasing. In terms of the internet, if we're trying to talk about this in terms of the internet, what is a computer? What are the different things you connect to the internet with? You got your laptops, you got your desktops, smartphones, tablets. What else? Printers. Now we're starting to get smart appliances, farming equipment, fridges, toasters, shoes. If you watch Big Bang Theory, or
Cars.
that episode of the one with penny blossoms in it, they wanted to make a version for guys that just said they'd add Bluetooth, give it some network connectivity. So realistically, could we say that a computer in terms of the internet is anything that can connect to the network? Is that fair? And really, almost everything today connects to the network. And if it doesn't, it's at least not as funny as it should be that it might. They do, in fact, sell toasters that connect to the internet. That used to be a joke. Now, your toaster could tell you today's weather. You have little apps on the toaster, and it shows you today's weather. And you see the movies, well, you're sitting there getting ready in the morning, you're shaving or whatever, and they got the news playing on the mirror and that kind of stuff, and you think we're very far from that? Probably not, right? It's not far-fetched like it used to be. All right, so we have millions of connected devices. We have something called hosts. A host, in terms of terminology, is our end systems. Those are the actual computers. This is a host. Laptops are a host. The printer's a host. The toaster's a host. Okay, so these are the guys that are on the network. These are all running network apps, possibly some other things. Okay, so your phones have apps on them. Your laptop has network-aware apps. Your web browser, your email client, your video games, that kind of stuff. But it has other apps that aren't network-aware. Notepad, actually Notepad on most of your laptops probably does store it in the cloud. So I think Notepad on Windows is not network-aware. And TextEdit. Actually, no, that has iCloud built into it. Very few applications don't connect to the internet. But certainly that's where maybe the definition changes today. We can say that a host on the internet, a computer on the internet, is something that has a network connection. You can pull an IP address, something like that. Then we have our communication links. Okay, these are the means by which our hosts talk to each other. All right? Well, actually, how our hosts, generally speaking, talk to other pieces of equipment that then allow us to talk to each other. So we can do this through fiber optic cables, copper, so like our Cat5, Cat6, those are copper-based cables, so big fat telephone line that has multiple pairs of twisted copper wire in it, radio signals, satellites. Okay, then we talk about transmission rate. So if I ask you, I like to ask this in all the computer science classes because it's shocking to me how many people get it wrong. How many of you have internet at home? Most of you, right? What's the speed of your internet? How many of you have DSL? How many of you have cable? How many of you have something else like satellite? Dial-up? We didn't get as many hands as there were. You guys suck. All right, who has a cable modem? Let's go that route. All right, what's the speed of your cable modem, Abe? 30 megabit? Okay, how fast is that? Well, what do you mean?
It's only as fast as you can download something.
Okay, so your internet has a capability of 30 megabit per second download, but you're only going to download something as fast as somebody else can upload it to you, right? Do you have good internet?
Considering most places upload it to you at less than 30, I think yes.
Okay, well, does that mean that your internet's overkill? Maybe you don't need 30. Maybe you only need 10. Why are you paying for 30? It's a waste of money. That could be going directly into the bribe fund.
Because that's where you get the free Wi-Fi router.
That's the price point when you get the free Wi-Fi router. Well, you say most places won't give it to you faster than, we'll say 5 megabits per second. Just using that as an example. Does that mean you don't need 30? Or is it just you using the internet connection at a time?
No.
So what are the different things you use the internet for in your house? You might be working on the internet doing homework. Your wife might be working on the internet browsing or shopping or doing stuff related to her job, right? You guys might have Netflix playing in the background. You might have several different internet-aware appliances running in your home at once that are all requiring some bandwidth. A piece of that 30 megabits per second. That make sense? Okay, now that's your download, that 30 megabits per second. What's your upload?
Officially, I'm not sure what they say, but it's about 1-2 megabits per second.
1 or 2 megabits per second? Okay, so my guess is if you have 30, it's probably 30 down, 3 up. That's probably what they sold you, but whatever, something like that. So typically, when you buy consumer internet, your download speed is substantially faster than your upload speed. Why? Don't you want fast upload speed?
Server sending people stuff.
Oh, so your upload speed is how fast somebody else can download from you, right? What do you use your upload speed for?
Some pictures on Facebook.
Okay, so uploading a picture to Facebook, attaching images to emails, attaching documents to emails, making small requests for web pages. I'd like to get google.com. That's going to be a tiny little request going out that's not going to require very much bandwidth at all. And then when you start downloading it, grabbing images and stuff, that's going to be bigger. And then probably your biggest draw on your upload is going to be seeding BitTorrent. But we all turn that off right after our download's done. So BitTorrent's a bit sharing protocol, so the idea is that you're downloading from everybody, so that means you're uploading to everybody. So that's using your upload. And the reason why you can download so quickly is you're uploading at 3 megabits per second, you're uploading at 3 megabits per second, you're uploading at 3 megabits per second. So if I'm downloading at 9 megabits per second, I download a different part of the app from you, different part of the file, then I can get it 9 megabits per second from 3 different sources. It's kind of how BitTorrent works. Okay, so why is it that they sell you a faster download speed than an upload speed?
Because you're downloading more things.
True. But how many of you in here do use BitTorrent for perfectly legal things, I'm sure? Many of us have used it at some point, right? In fact, actually, most games today, their legitimate network patch stuff, the game patch stuff, uses BitTorrent as the back-end protocol. When you download the World of Warcraft patch, you're not just downloading that from Blizzard. You're downloading it from the whole network. So they're doing it through a BitTorrent type technology as well. Perfectly legitimate use of that technology. So maybe you are using your upload more than you think. Would you say it's true that most people don't really understand how they use their upload? They don't really understand the difference? Like when somebody says what your internet speed is, it's probably going to be advertised. You know, the person installing it might just say, oh, it's 30 meg. Right? It might just say 30 meg. But how fast is 30 meg? So you say you have 30 megabit per second internet. How fast is that? How do you measure it?
By how much a file that I'm downloading is. If it's 30 megabits if it's 30 megabits, I should get it in a second if it's letting me download at the 30 megabit rate.
30 megabits. How big's 30 megabits? Give me an example of a file that's 30 megabits.
I don't know. Few pictures.
Few pictures? I guess it depends on how big a picture is. What about MP3? How many MP3s fit into 30 megabits? Average song.
I mean, if we're talking iTunes, it's going to be higher quality. It'll be bigger than that.
No. Well, just take your favorite Katy Perry song at reasonable quality converted to MP3.
That you're listening to lately.
Yeah. So how many MP3s fit inside 30 megabits?
Maybe like about 10.
10?
You need to convert megabits to megabytes.
Oh. So 10 is going to be a tough fit, right? So really, 30 megabits is probably about 1 MP3-ish. We divide 30 by 8. So it gives you 3 point blah blah. So you get your 3 plus megabyte file. That's 30 megabits. So that means you can download stuff at about, you said 3.25? 3.75. So 3.75 megabytes per second is how fast you can theoretically download stuff. Would you say that most people, though, make the mistake he made? Thinking that it's 30 megabytes. There isn't a difference between bytes and bits. Most people think that way, right? All right, so internet becomes a very consumer-based thing. Do we need faster internet, or is your internet fast enough? Absolutely, depends on what you're using it for. Is your internet fast enough for you? It does what you need it to do. Let's say that your internet was 100 megabit instead of 30. How would that benefit you in the way you use your internet? Would it actually benefit you?
If I'm downloading a bunch of things and I'm theoretically maxing out at 30, then yes, it would.
Well, but does that happen very often?
Probably not.
Okay, so would you say that very, very, very rarely do you run out of bandwidth? From your perception?
Yeah.
So really, paying for 100 megabit would be a waste of money. Realistically, right? Okay, so any more, and you said something very important a few minutes ago, and that is your download speed is limited by whoever you're downloading from's upload speed. That's important. Doesn't matter how awesome your internet is. If you're downloading from somebody's dial-up modem, your 100 megabit internet's going to download at 56 kilobit. Actually, not even 56 kilobit, 33.6 kilobit if it's dial-up. It's the fastest upload. That's not very fast. So really, the things that dictate how fast we need our internet to be today are things like how many different services will you be using simultaneously?
Is there a reason for the big difference between download and upload speeds?
There is. It's the difference is something called asynchronous versus synchronous internet connections. So what you guys have is an asynchronous. Most consumers have an asynchronous internet connection where they give you much faster download than upload, and it's because they don't want you running servers out of your house. Because in the early days of the internet, people would run, download, illegal movies and songs and stuff like that directly from somebody's house. You had a point-to-point network thing set up in the middle where they would redirect you to somebody's house where they were serving data up. So the whole reason a technology like BitTorrent exists is to circumvent the limitations that were put on us by having a slower upload speed. It's like, well, we still want to download stuff fast, and the legitimate places aren't going to host our illegal stuff. So we need a workaround to be able to distribute our illegal wares. Do they even call it wares anymore? Is that word even used? W-A-R-E-Z? That's like that's cracked software. You download it from wares sites. You think you've heard that before?
No, I haven't heard that in a long time.
Oh my God, I'm so old. I said something in my class this morning. What did I say? Oh, I said pun intended. And nobody says that anymore, apparently. It's like something you heard grandma say or something, right?
My grandmother's
All right. So, again, still sticking with this whole internet thing, what does good internet mean? So we have this thing, oh, shut up. What?
Fine then, no. So then, what do you think that, like, because who is it that, like, is trying to declare that 25 megabit, anything under that can't be considered bandwidth?
I don't necessarily know if that's an unfair statement today. I mean, especially now that everything is going towards streaming. And that's really the argument that the net neutrality stuff involves. You know, net neutrality deals with this idea that somebody's got to pay for the bandwidth, right? When we talk about kind of the history of internet connections this week, let's say, we're only going to be able to go a few more minutes today, but we'll talk about kind of how speeds have evolved. You know, we'll see that where we are today is hundreds of times faster, or thousands of times faster than we were even 10 years ago. 15 years ago in terms of data speeds. So, you know, the idea is that 25 megabit per second 15 years ago seemed like an impossible speed. Today, it's nothing impressive. You know, so if we were, you know, I'm just kind of making a guesstimate here, but if I was to convert the idea of 25 megabit per second today to a hard drive size, I might say that's like a 200 gigabyte hard drive. 300 gigabyte hard drive, something like that. You know, there's a lot faster internet connections out there than that. So that's really kind of a minimalistic, you know, internet. So I don't know that that's unfair to say that, especially since so much of our content today is streaming. And we'll talk about how, you know, when you think about the amount of data just to watch a single show on Netflix, the amount of data that has to travel over from your internet provider to get that data from the Netflix servers to you. And we'll talk about compression and things like that try to circumvent some of it. But, you know, point is that while we're streaming everything, we're moving a lot of data around. And since everything now is streaming, you know, all your phones are tethered to some sort of streaming service, right? You know, we all have some sort of push notification type thing. So at some level, something is keeping tabs on where your phone is as you jump from network to network to network so it can get push notifications to you. You know, I even recently, I've seen it for a while, my wife and I, our vacations are cruises. And when you're out in the middle of the ocean, you know, you can pay for the ship's crappy internet that's, I don't know, it's -7 megabits per second. And it's not usable. You have to be really desperate to need it. Or, but the point is, so I don't pay for it, but the internet's available on the ship. So my phone is connected to the Wi-Fi because there's like an app from Norwegian so my wife and I can like text and message each other on the boat through the local network on the ship. But since it's also attached to the internet, at some point, I still get push notifications while I'm on the ship, even though I'm not connected to the internet, because of how the push notification service works. And we'll kind of talk about some of those details. But, you know, things are streaming to my phone as long as there's some level of connectivity to the outside world, whether you're paying for it or not. I'll get pushed if you're on an airplane and you're connected to the Wi-Fi, but you decide you're not going to push that button and actually pay for the internet on the plane, you'll still get push notifications. So I knew what the Milwaukee Bucks score was when the game was over and that kind of stuff. I couldn't go follow up on it, but the point is that we have data streaming to us all the time. So I think as we move forward, we're going to have more and more bandwidth dedicated to these types of things. And the whole net neutrality argument. Does anybody know what net neutrality is? We've heard the phrase before, right? It's kind of the buzzword out there.
Data speed is equal for all data transmission, no matter what it is.
Okay, well, what does that mean?
That it's not like streaming movies compared to something else isn't going to be treated with a different type of data transfer speed.
Okay. So 30 megabit per second is 30 megabit per second, regardless of whether the source of that is Netflix or Bob's Donut Shop. The idea is that these data providers like Netflix and HBO and the services that are streaming, they want to be able to pay a premium for premium speed. They want to be able to go to the internet service providers and say, we will pay you money because, you know.
Isn't it the other way around? The internet service providers are the ones that
They want money.
Yeah.
Yeah, the internet service providers want the money.
Yeah.
Because they're the ones who are offering
Yeah, they're the ones
the
going
bandwidth.
to Netflix and saying we want to make you pay us.
Right. So ultimately it would be Netflix or HBO paying the service provider for either faster bandwidth or more bandwidth or something like that. Yeah, so instead of getting throttled. So, what you run into, so what makes the news reports is like when Comcast throttled, I think it was Netflix, right? So, all of a sudden Netflix was almost unusable on Comcast. And why is that? Well, it's because, Netflix was using up a lot of Comcast bandwidth. Somebody has to pay for that. Well, what if, so those of you in here who are cable, you're Time Warner, right? Time Warner Cable is your provider? Abel?
Mine's Charter.
Charter? Where do you live?
West Bend.
Do they have power in West Bend? Okay, so your Charter Cable, fine. So let's say Charter Cable came to you and said, yeah, we sold you 30 megabits, but you're using a lot of bandwidth. Total bandwidth. That accumulates. 30 megabits per second is a lot per minute, a lot per hour if you're maximizing the connection, right? And that starts adding up to you using a lot of their total bandwidth to do your stuff. So what if they came to you and said, so you probably pay, what, $30, $40 a month for your internet? Something like that. What if they came to you and said, you know what, it's hard for us to stay afloat. We're going to need to charge you $400 a month for that same connection. What are you going to do?
Say no.
Look for another provider, right? Well, what these internet providers are really saying is they're getting the short end of the stick. Their bandwidth is getting abused as new technology is building up that streams everything. That's what everything is happening. That's what's happening with all these different providers now. Everything streams. So without us even wanting to abuse the network, many of us in here, I'm sure we've binged on a show on Netflix, right? Okay, we're not doing illegal activities when we sit there and watch, 40 straight episodes of The Wire. But that's a lot of data that we're moving. And we're not doing anything wrong, but that's a lot different than those providers needed to deal with 3 or 4 years ago. Make sense? So what net neutrality is, it deals with us as consumers not wanting certain services to slow down so that other services can be fast. Because that's not fair. We want everything to be fast, but we also don't want to pay for it. The providers say, well, somebody's got to pay for it. And then the content providers, the internet providers say somebody's got to pay for it. The content providers say, fine, we'll pay for it, but ours needs to be faster. So you get all these people who want special treatment in the whole thing. What do you think personally?
I think they need to expand their infrastructure
To what end?
so that there's more bandwidth to go around.
Fine. So Charter goes and expands their infrastructure, and next thing you know, the companies that were streaming at 1080i are now streaming at 1080p, and then they stream at 4K. They're just going to keep filling up the infrastructure, and then pointing to them and say, you ran out of bandwidth again. Because it's really easy to increase the content that you're streaming. That's bits. You don't have to build out, more wires and crap. So I think the providers can only expand to a certain point.
Not expanding at all.
I'm not sure they have to. Honestly, at least the cable providers, they have bandwidth to go around. We'll talk about the difference between cable and DSL. But it's an interesting thing. From a consumer perspective, we don't want to pay more. Right? Our bills are high enough from a consumer. In fact, they should go down. Consumers always want less, their bills to be smaller. But, do we get upset if our Netflix starts cutting out? I'd pay good money for this 6 months free internet that goes up to $39 a month, and I'm then going to tell them I'm going to threaten to quit and get it for $28.75. Yeah, we want our cake and eat it too. So net neutrality is an interesting thing. We'll talk more about it. So that's that. We'll pick up here on Wednesday. Make sure you at least think about some of the stuff because it's not necessarily off limits for me to give you a quiz on Wednesday.
I think providers will start pushing, like how you pay for cell phone, you pay for an amount. I use
To an extent, they sort of have been doing that for years. Most internet providers have somewhere in their contract a cap on the total amount you can have, but that cap becomes less and less relevant every day. Related to what I said to Amish, it's if it was 30 megabytes or 30 gigabytes a month 2 years ago. Well, 30 gigabytes a month 2 years ago got you a lot farther than 30 gigabytes a month gets you today. There's more content to stream, and the content keeps getting more and more high def, which means more data for the same show. Make sense?
Yeah.
So it becomes difficult. Almost immediately, if you enter into something that's giving you so much data per month or per week or whatever it is, you almost immediately have an antiquated plan because of how you use that.
What if they did something that's more along the lines of like electricity, and charged you by the amount you use per month?
But, we're potentially going to go in that direction, but what's going to end up happening then is you're going to have people complaining about the cost. When we think about our power bill, and your power bill is, so those of you who live in apartments or stuff, your power bill might be what, 40, 50, 60 bucks a month? Mine's like $380 a month at my house. I run a lot of electronics and stuff like that. So, it's, I don't complain about $380, but let's say 1 month all of a sudden my power bill was $3,000. Well, I would probably notice, right? So there's people today that don't necessarily recognize how they're digesting content on the internet. So if you start charging per megabyte or bit or however you meter it, I think you're going to end up having problems because consumers won't pay more. When I think a lot of consumers will end up, really what you're saying is pay for what you use.
Yeah.
Right? That's certainly fair. From a human perspective, it's certainly fair to pay for what you use, but when you see the bill, you might not agree with it. It's like, wait, I want to use this, but I want to pay less than that. It's really a tough thing because somebody has to pay.
Aren't they debating making internet a utility?
Well, it really already is a utility.
More so of a utility where it's like pay for what it carries. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's fine, but you're going to still run into that problem. You can't make internet prohibitively expensive. So what you're probably going to see is a lot more advertisements with streaming services and stuff like that to support the bandwidth. So I think realistically, I think that the net neutrality thing is somewhat of a double-edged sword. If you why shouldn't Netflix be able to give money to Charter to make them ignore the bandwidth that you're using from Netflix so that it doesn't go against your cap? Or if you're paying as you go, maybe when you're streaming Netflix, that's charged at a lower rate because Netflix is a paid supporter of it or something like that. So I think there's a lot of different variables that go into it, but hey, if you want to digest the data, you want to get the movies and stuff off Netflix, and they want to get those things to you because that's their business model, and they have money to pay maybe they should be able to go faster.
Well, I guess you're phrasing your arguments in a completely opposite way that I've always seen the arguments phrased. Is that basically the ISPs are saying that Netflix needs to pay us, or we will throttle the
Yeah, absolutely, right.
Not that Netflix wants to pay to go
No,
faster,
what Netflix wants is to keep the throttle open.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they're not wanting. Nobody wants to pay more for something that they're already getting. But the point is, Netflix doesn't want their data to get throttled because then they lose subscribers. Yeah, so Netflix wants to do what they need to do that will cost them the least amount of money to make sure that their customers are ultimately happy. And right now, their customers' happiness to some extent is out of their hands because it's based on how the internet provider handles Netflix-based data. So somebody's got to pay for it. And I agree with that. Why should Comcast or Time Warner or whoever the parent companies end up being, why should they have to foot the bill as the technology changes? Somebody's got to pay the bill. Should probably be the consumers for a fairness perspective, but we don't want to. We're not going to pay more,
Do you
right?
know the margins on what the bandwidth cost for?
I don't.
Because I've heard that's really high. So.
Well, it very well might be. But, I mean, everybody, I think it's a very common thing for people to look at a business and say, oh, they have enough money. But when you consider the risks they take and the amount of overhead they have and the number of people that they have employed and stuff like that, I'm not saying that they're starving. I'm just saying that I think more often than not, I mean, businesses are for-profit entities. They need to make their money. So now it's the question of where does the money come from? Does the money come from a bigger fish that can afford to pay it? You know, maybe what happens is Netflix ups their rates by $1 per person. If Netflix goes up by $1 per person, maybe we don't scream too loud, right? How many of you would quit Netflix if it went up by $1 a month? Probably wouldn't, right?
I don't have Netflix in the first place.
Yeah, we probably wouldn't. Just using that as an example. So what if Netflix upped your price by $1 so that they could then give money to the providers to support their network? That's going to be an easier pill to swallow, I think, for consumers than if Charter came to you and said, we're going to triple your price because of how much data you're using. You know, if we can share the load over multiple people. I mean, somebody's getting screwed at some point in that whole argument. You know, and would you rather have it be, death by a million little cuts or a beheading? You know, it's...
I think what most people are pushing though for the net neutrality thing is that it's like if Netflix pays the ISPs and they get no throttle, what people are worried about is that they're not going to get a throttle on Netflix, but then they're just going to throttle everything else.
But isn't that the provider's prerogative? I mean, if Charter does that and all of a sudden Abe starts getting disgusted with it, he can go to a different provider.
No, see, that doesn't work when there's no providers to go to.
That's your point.
If there was actual competition, I would be fine with ISP.
Because then the competition keeps everybody in check.
Yeah, but there's
But
no
when it's based on a monopoly, I get it. When it's based on a monopoly,
like here you generally, I don't know where the heck you got Charter from, but in Cedarburg, the only place you can get it from is Time Warner
and AT&T. Yeah.
Like where I live, I don't have cable. Like it doesn't reach there, so I have to. I'm stuck with with extended wireless from their radio towers or whatever.
And even in situations where it's not a real monopoly, but it still kind of is. I mean, AT&T, let's say they take 50% of the internet people. Time Warner takes the other 50%.
We don't compete.
It's.
There was a
There's
video
no
that they came out with. It was like some interview with a cable dude or whatever, and it's like he was trying to explain how it's not a monopoly. He's just like.
Yeah,
it was like
Comcast is in New York,
Comcast is over here.
Yeah, I saw that.
And then it's like that's a monopoly. That's just two monopolies agreeing with each other.
So I mean, but I'm not sure there's a real clean solution to it at all.
I mean, I as I said, I'd be fine if there was actual competition. I'd be fine with them discriminating against different types of data. But
when
since
you don't
there
have
isn't,
options.
When you don't have options to change because they're like, oh, I don't like what
I
you're
do
doing,
think
I'm
though,
going
if you
over
meter
here
it
now.
and there's a national cost per megabyte, let's say, that's a set fee per megabyte that every provider has to charge. So let's say we do that. That seems fair, right? Okay. I don't think that consumers would be happy with what their bills look like. The consumers that actually use the internet, I don't think I think their bills are going to be higher than they can maintain. I mean, obviously, it all depends on what they charge per megabyte or something like that. But I think putting that burden on the end consumer will make them more unhappy than you getting locked into one provider that's going to give you whatever they're going to give at a rate, and your bill goes up either not at all or a little tiny bit to support everything, and somebody else is paying a whole lot. Why shouldn't they have the.
The problem there is that you still have that monopoly factor, and they can just keep increasing that price with no.
But they do that already. I mean, that's no different than what we have now. In the situation, the bottom line is somebody has to pay.
Yeah, it should be the ISPs.
Yeah. Well, but if the ISPs are going to expand their network, then they're going to raise your bill to support that expanded network. So fine. ISP says, sure, we'll commit to spending, $300 million to expand our network, and then we'll raise every one of our.
Government, why don't you give us some money so we can do this? Sure, we'll give you money, and then
They raise your taxes.
No, the money just disappears and then never gets used to expand the network at all.
Yeah, I mean, we're just shifting responsibility around. At some point, somebody's got to pay, and the average consumer can only accept an increase by so much. If your cable provider, satellite provider, whatever, came to you and tripled the price just to support your Netflix habit or whatever, a normal consumer is not going to stand for that. But what's an extra, $100 million to Netflix if they can turn around and just raise everybody's Netflix bill by $1? We feel that less, but the money's still, it's the same money moving around, just moving around differently. I don't know there's really a fair way of doing it. Would we rather them just turn off the internet? We'd probably complain more, right?
At this point, I don't think that's an option.
Yeah, I think that's why net neutrality is really an interesting argument, because somebody's got to pay, and it's somebody's responsibility for this stuff. Consumers don't want the bill, but consumers want the end game. We want the benefits without the costs. But that's definition of a consumer. I mean, that's not us being stupid in this situation. We're happy when gas is less money. Well, our car still goes, 27 miles per gallon, whatever our car gets. And now the gallon just costs us less. We're happy. We don't think about, the price of oil is way down, so all these other things are being negatively affected by that too. Costs less to drive to work. Yeah, it's the economy we live in. It's capitalism.